Hello and welcome along to another episode of Tackling Sport Podcast. It's Daniel here, joined once again by my brother Sean.
How's it going?
And firstly, apologies for not getting as much content there between Sean doing assignments and I've actually started a new role as a full-time sports journalist with Pundit Arena, so we've been quite busy. I see Stephen Duff there smirking in the background there for those on YouTube. Stephen Duff's joining us for our Dublin-Mayo preview. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dan. Congratulations on the new role.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Yeah, I'm already upsetting hurling people. I was just telling you just before we came on air. They don't seem to fancy the black card in hurling. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
Traditionalist hurling folk, they're a bit stubborn, aren't they? We know a few of them ourselves. They're a bit backward and old-fashioned. They kind of could do it, open up a bit.
I link the article for people to be aware, but even Facebook comments are misquoting.
There's a plug.
Yeah, there's a couple of plugs there. Just check the description. All my articles are available on punditarena.com. But they're just misquoting me in the Facebook comments. That's what really bothers me, I think.
You've taken this to heart, haven't you? You're not going to let this
go. Yeah, like you said, I might do the Wooly thing and just start following zero people, see how that goes.
An empty Twitter feed would be ideal.
But listen, over Christmas, myself and Sean, we're planning on we're doing our last Premier League predictions. That should be in your podcast feed shortly. Christmas special there. We're welcoming back James Moe, a fan's favourite. And other than that, then we're going to kind of pick it up again after Christmas in the new year. So in terms of our interviews and stuff. But yeah. That's it. That's what's planned for Tackling Sport. Sean, we said we get a Dublin-Mayo preview. I'll start with you before I get to Stephen. Excited for the final? You did say that you'd fancy Mayo to get to the final, but albeit Kerry losing and Donegal losing was a bit of a shock.
Yeah. And I think, there's so much being said every time Mayo seem to get this far. Is it their year? Can it be this year? And I think, for me, for a certain group of players, I think this has to be thereabout. What's different is they had to go and win Connacht this year, which they haven't had to do in the last few years, and they went and won it, beating the two best teams, albeit Galway hadn't a warm-up game, if you like. But I do think there's something different about this Mayo side, and like I said, the likes of, Keelan O'Connor, Aidan O'Shea, albeit they're, not over the hill in terms of their age, they'll have to be thinking, how many more cracks at the whip are we going to get? And it's almost a free shot at Dublin because, they haven't had to beat Kerry, they haven't had to beat Tyrone to get there. And not that it's been a soft passage through because they, like I said, had to beat Roscommon and Galway, but it's probably the easiest passage to an All-Ireland final. So you could say now this is really the last chance saloon, if you like, for that group of players. And it's the kind of last year you could make exceptions for. Next year we don't know what's going to happen with a championship, if we'll get one at all, how many people are going to be there at matches. So I do think there is that sense this year that, Mayo have to show something again. Otherwise it's, it's going to be a lasting legacy that, they've been soldiering for, 7 or 8 years now, and they haven't got over the line.
Yeah, Stephen, it almost felt the 2019 final last year, semi-final last year. It just felt that with Mayo's, that capitulation at the start of the second half, it felt that was their chance gone almost. How do you see this going? Do you still give them a chance? And it almost feels like bonus territory in the sense that they've managed to get back to an All-Ireland final and another crack with Dublin.
Yeah, it's just strange how quick the narrative can change in a team. Like we go from, as you said, the semi-final last year, which was 18 months ago, probably maybe less, 15 months ago. And we said this was the end of an era for Mayo. And then they go and get relegated from Division 1 in strange circumstances. And then they get through a Connacht Championship where they beat a disappointing Galway. They've beaten Cavan, they win Connacht. And now we're thinking that they can go and beat Dublin. Now, they've shown shoots of some really good football. They've found some really good players like Tommy Conroy, Oisin Mullen, O'Mclaughlin, these type of players who have come forward. But are we putting too much expectation on them too early? I was of the opinion that James Horan was building for a 3-year term, 4-year term, but maybe next year challenging. I'd say if the championship had remained the same and you would have had the back door and the Super 8 system, that Mayo would have been planning to get to the Super 8 and that would have been their target. Maybe an All-Ireland semi-final. I think James Horan might have been planning, if all things remaining equal, for an All-Ireland attempt next year and definitely in year 3. Whether they can do it this Saturday, it's exciting. They've got an exciting team. The heart says yes, definitely, and why can't you? But the head says this Dublin team, they just haven't taken the foot off. Their performances are growing and growing. They're like a machine. They know their processes inside out to take ownership of everything. It's player driven. they've got, what I learned during the week is that they've got 44 on their backroom team, that not even half of their backroom team can actually get into Croke Park at the weekend. So
wow,
the resources they have, the players they have, the culture they have, it just screams to me like 6 in a row. And I think the really worrying thing is if they go and they win by 10 points or more, or if they go by 8 points or more, we could be sitting here this time next week and having a very serious conversation about the state of Gaelic games.
Yeah, and we will have a review show on Monday to review the All-Ireland final. Stephen, we'll stick with you. We'll get straight into the matchups, I think. How do you think Mayo are going to line up? Because I think we'll spend the majority of time with the matchups talking about Mayo on Dublin. How would you, maybe, if you had a quick six there, how would you line up? So in reality, Mayo's back six is going to be Oisin Mullen, Chris Barrett, Lee Keegan, although we're not sure. He could potentially be pushed out from the corner. And then you got Derek and Cohen and Owen McLaughlin. Who's going to take who to start with the matchups? Who are the guaranteed that, on the first whistle? Because some part of me is thinking Lee Keegan would want another crack at Conor Callan. But at the same time, I do think he's vulnerable in that corner. And I remember looking at Michael Quillivan's first goal chances. He was awful under the high ball as well. I do think he wants another crack at him, but whether James Horan is going to risk that and maybe they can push Lee Keegan on at times during the game.
Something to think about as well is Oisin Mullen, to remember then as well, as Oisin Mullen probably hasn't been a defensive cornerback. He hasn't been a man-marking cornerback. He has been an extra line to their attack coming with Owen McLaughlin. The two of them have been running from deep, and sometimes Patrick Durkin as well. So I don't know. Oisin Mullen's a great player and he's really exciting, but defensively, what's he going to offer against that? Will he go to Dean Rock? Maybe that's the one he goes in there, because Dean Rock doesn't offer the same potency as the rest of them in all-out attack. He's probably their free taker and their shooter to get onto the end of shots. Keegan, for me, definitely wants another crack at Conor Callahan. I was thinking off the top of my head, and I don't know if this would work if the rest of them fit in, but could Keegan step to Niall Scully? Niall Scully, I think, is probably one of the most underrated players in the country. Makes everything tick for him. And Lee Keegan's probably one of the best man markers in the country. He did it to Dermot Connolly for so many years. If you can cut out the ball and actually mark Niall Scully, does that cut out one of Dublin's 3 or 4 main threats? Does it stop supply going into the full forward line? Stephen Cohen could probably take Kieran Kilkenny, but at what point does he hold his position and what point does he follow him all the way? But yeah, probably looking at Oisin Mullen to Dean Rock firstly anyway. And then there's probably an argument to Sean. I don't know what you think about that idea of taking Lee Keegan as Niall Scully.
Yeah, just on that point, Sean, before you come in, there's definitely Lee Keegan will physically impose himself on Niall Scully. Whether that happens or not is another thing.
Yeah, like I've been running through this as well, and Lee Keegan against Kieran Kilkenny would be my preference if Kieran Kilkenny was playing a normal role, but he's not. He's in the full forward line, and like you said, that ball that went in and fell, I think, was it to Quinlivan? Yeah. I think James Horan be looking at that going, he can't give Dublin that quarter of a chance, So I think Lee Keegan maybe on Niall Scully, because Keegan would be able to get into the game a lot more. You don't want him in his own 21. I think with Conor Callahan, Con's been playing, I still think there's a level to come from Conor Callahan this year. I think he's been struggling with injuries at times, especially I know with Cool in the club championship. So I think there's probably another level to come from him, and whether that's on the 40, whether it's on the 21, I think I think you could see Lee Keegan swap. I don't think he's going to man mark someone, because I think that Dublin line is so fluid.
But the other thing on Conor Callahan, Sean, there as well, is, sorry to cut across it, is that they're going to use that kick out option of him coming late and straight down the middle. So you might want to have someone with a bit of size and a bit of an aerial threat about him if they're going to compete with Con. Because if you allow Con a free jump in the air to come down, and we've seen him all do it, and he can turn with biomechanically nearly impossible.
The Ross Common one, it's still ridiculous. I only watched it the other day.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, he can come down on one leg and bend his knee in all sorts of ways, and he's through on goal. So that's something that maybe Mayo need to consider. And have they got somebody in the back who can...
Oisin Mullen, maybe?
Yeah, the thing about Oisin Mullen is, has he been tested as a man-marking cornerback?
Yeah, probably not. Sean?
And then you still have Paddy Durkin then. Like, the thing about, like, what Paddy Durkin and Lee Keegan do well is when they run at an opposition's defence and they might kick a score or something. But I think against Dublin, like every time I watch Paddy Durkin, like I think he's a good footballer, but I don't get the massive hype towards him, right?
No.
If you watch him in a game, he's probably the most Mayo player I've seen in the last 7 years. Like, he'll play class for 10 minutes or kick 2 points, and then when you need him to maybe recycle the ball or kick a score, he'll drop it wide, he'll drop it into the keeper's hand, he'll give away a bad hand pass. So he's one of them players. I think he's either an all or nothing. He either is the best player on the pitch, or he's, you know, at fault for a few things. So like, if James Horan wants Paddy Durcan and Lee Keegan getting on the ball, making good decisions. So like I said, I think Con and Paddy Durcan maybe, you know, but then how Dublin know about Lee Keegan and Paddy Durcan. So whether they change things about how they do it, like it's probably like the best thing about that Dublin-Mayo games, you know, from, what was it, 2013 to 2017 or whatever, was you went into every game knowing Dublin's best 15 roughly and Mayo's best 15. You knew who was marking who, you know, what were the key standouts like Dermot Connolly and Lee Keegan, and there was a real sense of familiarity. These teams have a couple of different players. They've got the likes of Paddy Small, McLaughlin for Mayo, obviously the likes of Mullen, Conroy, and Dublin have Merchant, who's probably starting, you know, he came off the bench in the All-Ireland or whatever. But I think now we're seeing a few more new players where you could see an added dimension to it. But like I said, I think Paddy Durcan and Lee Keegan, you don't want them in their own 20-21 line yard. So I expect to see them marking, you know, whether it is Conor Callahan, whether it's, you know, Niall Scully.
Yeah, the other one we haven't mentioned at all is Chris Barrett. So Chris Barrett has done it for Mayo for numerous years. He's done it against Dublin, so he might be an option. But he's an option for Con, I don't know, but he's definitely an option for to pick up.
Maybe.
No, I think he's going to be Kieran Kilkenny. I think with the year Kieran Kilkenny's had, he's sat in and he goes, like, I watch Kieran Kilkenny sometimes and just go, he's not trying. He goes through the motions, and then you know, he'll kick 3 points in 2 minutes. I think it's him and Fenton for Player of the Year. Not that Dublin have had a huge amount of games, but just the skill level that Kieran Kilkenny has had. And I think Chris Barrett is the man if there's going to be anyone, because Chris Barrett's out of all them, he's probably the most experienced kind of full backline defender, if you know what I mean. So if Kieran Kilkenny gets the ball on the 21, you know, maybe a Lee Keegan dives in and tries to, you know, make a rash decision, and all of a sudden Kieran Kilkenny's throwing goal. So I think that experience from Chris Barrett, I think, is why he will mark Kilkenny.
Is there an argument as well that Mayo won't focus too much on their matchups, that they're going to focus on year being the year it is, 2020, that they're going to focus on themselves and not going to try to get bogged down in opposition and trying to figure out what Dublin does? Because we've all seen teams, and probably Cavan did it to a certain point in the semi-final, that they got bogged down in worrying about what Dublin were going to do too much, and you can't counteract everything that Dublin do. So you just need to focus on your own game and be proactive in your approach and look to take Dublin on in certain areas of the field. So yes, you're going to have your 3 or 4 matchups like your Fenton, your Niall Scully, your Kieran Kilkenny, your Conor Callahan. They need to be tied up, because if they're not that tied up, every team's in serious trouble. But if Mayo get bogged down and looking to man-mark everyone and get their matchups right across the field, they could be forgetting about the key message here, that they need to go out and impose their style of football on Dublin, which I don't know, have we seen a huge amount enough of this year? I
agree, because every time you watch Dublin they can play at 1 mile an hour, they can play at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Like they, you know, I think personally how I see the game going, I see Mayo hanging in there for a long part of the game, but Dublin will get a score, I think, in and around the 50th or the 60th minute mark, where they'll cradle possession, as they call it, for about 4 minutes. Mayo won't lay a glove. Mayo will think they're in the game, and all of a sudden the Brian Fenton and Kieran Kilkenny will take ownership and they'll pop the ball over, and it'll be at that moment that Dublin will know they're in full control, and Mayo will know they're continuously chasing the game. And unless Mayo go out and, you know, the first ball they run and they hit them as hard as if it's the last ball, and they make it as a quick as game as possible, I think that's where their best chance is, because if you play the game at 100 miles an hour, then you're relying a lot more on skill execution. And I think Mayo are probably one of the better teams at times, you know, maybe not decision making, but in terms of skill execution, I think they've got a lot of forwards who, you know, can score or kick a hand pass or make a 30-yard run and take the ball. Whereas, you know, if it's a slow game, it's about systems. I think that just, you know, Dublin are monsters at that.
And I think
just on that, Stephen, sorry, before you came in, the stats from, say, 2015 to 2020, Dublin are having more points per possession but less possession. So it's almost a different Dublin team to back to the 2015 to 17 era that Mayo are going to face. So in a way, it could be a slightly different game, as Sean mentions, where Dublin are just probably having more of the ball, and it's maybe a slower game in that way, and Dublin are retaining the ball a bit better. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, and just to go back to Sean's point, I think that's the key part of this is Mayo can play out of their socks for 50 or 60 minutes, and Dublin can cruise to an 8-point win. And Mayo could control the game and look like and make a really exciting game for 60 minutes, and Dublin will still win by 8 points. And that's the thing. And they'll kick that one score that Sean's talked about, where they've built possession, they've controlled the game, they've controlled the pace and the actual ball, and they'll kick a score after 4 minutes, and they'll know they're in control, and everyone else will know they're in control, and the life will be sucked out of Mayo, and they'll chip on 4 or 5 more points out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you're looking at an 8-point win, and all of a sudden there's a conversation on Tuesday about Dublin's dominance. But anyway, back to your question, Dan. Yeah, it's a completely different team, and their approach is continuously growing. Like what they had that process-driven approach under Jim Gavin, and that's continued. And now what they're looking to do this year is really just suffocate teams with just possession. It's almost like that soccer. They're willing to go back. They're willing to hold the ball. If you drop off, that's fine. We'll hold this ball. They'll take it up the left-hand side. They'll come back to take it up the right-hand side, and they'll hold. And they've got this immense concentration, because at that level of football, to continuously do that over and over, the concentration and focus that must go into these possession games that they have under high intensity, under high mental intensity as well. They just pick that spot. If you fall asleep for a second, it's gone. They're going to find that gap. They're in. They're going to take that angle of run. They're going to pivot. They're running dummy lines. They're running decoys. Everything. The screens that they brought in when they had Adam, what's his name, Mark Engel from DCU, Mercy, and the basketball coach. All these things have built up, and it's all accumulated to the way they're playing now. And this is why, for me, like, I know we all want Mayo to put up a challenge. I just think that last year, for the 5 in a row, we didn't see Dublin to their full potential. I think, and we heard it in Jack McCaffrey's podcast with Bernard Brogan, that there was a crippling fear amongst Dublin going into that final, that they were afraid they weren't going to win the 5 in a row. I think they're going to relax and enjoy this final a lot more, and that's the worrying piece. Well, the great piece for you guys, because you love the Dubs, but the worrying piece is that they could really find their flow this weekend.
Yeah, I guess it's probably more important than for Desi Farrell than any of the players, Sean.
Yeah, like no doubt he'll be under pressure, and it's one of them that when it does end, this All-Ireland winning streak, and do the players that next February go back in with the same enthusiasm of representing their county and trying to build up again. You don't know, and you hope eventually some county will knock them off their perch. I give Mayo a chance, a very, I wouldn't say a very good chance, but a fighting chance. I think they need a lot of things to go their way. I think they need to be disciplined like they've never been before. And like Stephen said there, if Dublin play a slow game, I think that's just going to tire Mayo out physically and mentally. Gary Neville always says on Sky, the hardest runs are, that 2 or 3 yard shuffle to your right, because they're moving possession so quick in football. I think it's the same in GA. I mean, if you're a left corner back and they've got the ball on the left-hand side and Dublin move it over to the right, you don't switch off because it's a 30-yard kick pass. So you're still on your toes. You're shuffling 2 or 3 yards. The forward's in total control, because the forward can stand there and just jolt at a second, but the defender is always on their toes. The concentration levels are slowly fading, and then it's one of the big three. It's it's your Dean Rock, your Kieran Kilkenny, your Brian Fenton, whoever. They come on, they take the ownership of the point. One big problem I see with Mayo is I don't know if they have a midfield that is able to combat Brian Fenton. To be honest, I don't think there's many in the country do, but I think Mayo's probably biggest weakness at the moment is their sort of lack of experience, if you like, in midfield. I like Matthew Rowan. I think he's a decent footballer, but I think there's levels to this, and I think there's very few people that can match him. I know it's been well documented that Jack Barry has done it for Kerry at times, and yeah, he has to a certain extent, but Brian Fenton still kicks 2 or 3 points off him. So that's the level of player you're dealing with. And I don't know what they're going to do, because if you make the pitch small with Brian Fenton and you try and suffocate everyone through the middle, he'll just run around teams and they'll pop a ball over. Or I don't think, the one thing about Brian Fenton is I don't think I've seen a midfielder that is in both boxes so often. He's a box-to-box midfielder. Like so many midfielders, you might think Aidan O'Shea, he might have sat a bit deeper in, or Kieran Whelan was a very advanced midfielder. Brian Fenton's in both boxes more than he's not, and I think that's the difference. And he knows his role, and that's what Dublin do. They know their role. Whereas Matthew Rowan and I know Conor Loftus has played in and around there, and they like to get runners in and around midfield. But I think I think that's a glaring mismatch there for me.
No, you're right, and like the other one is like we've mentioned him so many times already, and we're already on for 20 minutes. Is does Lee Keegan go to midfield and just stand with Brian Fenton everywhere he goes? He's done
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that now. Yeah, that's interesting.
He's done it in the past, and if we're saying that Brian Fenton makes a tick, and you just say, look, don't compete with him in the air, wait for him to come down, and you just stick to him everywhere he goes. Who's your most sticky back? It's Lee Keegan, and I think Mayo have enough defenders in the back, enough defenders on their bench that they could afford to do that. But it depends on what you're looking for. But if you're looking to really take, like Matthew Ruan and Conor Loftus aren't going to mark Brian Fenton. That's not their game. They're not going to do that, and it's a waste of time thinking it. So then your options are whether you get Diarmuid O'Connor and Kevin McLaughlin dropping out around the middle, and we're crowding it. But as you said, Sean, like he's just going to go around that. He knows his way around a crowded defence easy enough. These just put someone to stick with him and sacrifice Lee Keegan for the game and say, whoever Brian Fenton is, you are. And that's it.
I would say as well, like the semi-final, if you mentioned, if you mentioned James McCarthy in the semi-final, everyone would have gone, geez, was he playing? Because he was marking Corrado McKiernan from Cavan, who is their talisman. Everything comes through him. So whether James plays a similar role, I'm not sure. He'd be my contender for man of the match, because I think Mayo would just not forget about him, but they might overload with Kilkenny or Con or Brian Fenton, and James McCarthy will just have the freedom on that right channel that he loves. That you picture James McCarthy point, it's looking from the Hogan, hitting over into the canal end, just breezing the ball over. That's his area of Croke Park, if you like. And I think if they don't prepare for that, and I think we could see the two of them line out midfield, James McCarthy and Brian Fenton, which gives Dublin another option in the full back line, which we'll, I'm sure, get onto. But I think if you forget about James McCarthy, he'll eat Mayo up, and he'll eat the ground up. And it'll be interesting what Dessie Farrell does. Does Dessie Farrell give him a man marking job? And I'm not sure if Mayo have that sort of marquee centre forward, if you like, player that you would expect James McCarthy to mark. I know McLaughlin's young. I think the only thing is whether Diarmuid O'Connor and James McCarthy will battle up, and it'll sort of be a mutual thing. They'll both want to do that. And because Diarmuid O'Connor is a big threat for Mayo, and he's got the athleticism to match McCarthy for some amount of the game anyway. But I think James McCarthy is going to have a big game for Dublin if Mayo aren't careful.
Yeah, and just final thing then before we move on to Dublin matchups then. So what are we thinking then in general for the back six, or maybe include the Conor Loftus and Matthew Ruan? You don't think, for starting with the midfield there, Stephen, that they're going to actually man mark? It'll be more a case that maybe a Diarmuid O'Connor picks up Brian Fenton, or a Lee Keegan, or they cover the meal, with Diarmuid O'Connor and Kevin McLaughlin.
I just don't think that. Well, they may well have marking roles, the two of them, but they're not going to be able to keep up with Brian Fenton. And that's the way it is. So they're going to find something else. If that's the way James Horan goes, I hope he has another plan up his sleeve, because if you're relying on Matthew Ruan to go with Brian Fenton, I hope I'm wrong, but I think we might be in trouble.
The only person saying that, I think, Tom Parsons off the bench. I know he's had a really bad injury, and he's come back, and it's been a great story to him to come back. He got a few minutes against Tip. I'm wondering, is James Horan saving him, because he's a huge player for Mayo, and probably what they're lacking in and around that midfield, and even if you go from their half-back line to their midfield to their half-forward line, is a bit of experience there. Is that we don't know where Keegan's going to play, but I think they're missing a bit of experience. So I'm not one for mind games, but I think we could see Tom Parsons a lot earlier than we did the last day, and I think they could have been saving him, and I think he could start.
Start ahead of Conor Loftus.
Yeah, I don't know if they make a wholesome change, because I think Loftus and Rowan are two quite athletic footballers, and you kind of need them, and you need Diarmuid O'Connor. So I think if you had those four in and around midfield or the half back line, whether they take a half back out or they take McLaughlin out, who I think has been good for Mayo, but you can kind of play O'Connor there maybe, or Conor Loftus has got the pace for it. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Parsons start, because I was very surprised that he came on, and he came on late enough. And in my head, I was thinking, the game's won at half time, give him 30 minutes, get him acclimatized in case he has to come on. But I was thinking whether he saved him, and he's been an outstanding player for Mayo, and he not that he's been a difference maker, but I think he added a bit of steel to that midfield for a while. And I'm not sure he'll man mark Fenton, but he'll compete with Fenton in the air.
Just before you come in, Stephen, like I always think with similar to you, Sean, with something like Tom Parsons, he's saving him. I remember Colin Cooper in the 2014, he was like warming up with the subs in the semi-final. I'm going, okay, he's been saved for the final against Donegal. And sure, he never came on in the end. So there is that question mark in my head that, people like keeping their cards close to their chest, but surely, maybe 30 minutes from Tom Parsons is more important than that, Stephen. I don't know what you think, whether he'll play a big role or not. I'm not too sure based on the fact he didn't play too long in the semi-final.
It'd be such a comeback for the guy, wouldn't it? Come at the hour, come at the man type of a thing. But it's something that crossed my mind before I was preparing for this call and have a look at it. Is Tom Parsons is going to have some involvement if Mayo are going to win. He brings that steel around the middle. I would not be surprised to see him start. And I think what Sean is saying makes a huge amount of sense, and I agree with everything he says. I think you can't leave a guy like that on the bench for too long if you've got a threat like Fenton around the middle of the field, and your two midfielders that you do have don't pose a counteracting threat to what Dublin have. And I think it'd be foolish of James Horan not to involve him at some point, whether he starts or not. But I think he's going to need to have a huge involvement in the game, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him start. No, I agree with Sean.
Yeah, and I think James Horan is a very experienced Gaelic Games manager, and I think he'll know that, you can't save someone for a 20-minute burst against the Dubs, because the game could be over after 10 minutes, 5 minutes. So even if he doesn't start, like if something's gone wrong, I can see Parsons coming on straight away, and he's got not wrongs to right, but I think that his story with his injury, it's been well documented what happened. He thought his career was over. His club, actually, Charlestown, suffered a huge tragedy with the death of the guard, Colm Horkin. So I think there's that little bit of storyline as well. I think he's ready for it. Like I said, when I watched the game against Tip and I saw Loftus and Rowan, I was like, they can't go against Dublin like that. I was like, both of them, they're nice footballers, don't get me wrong, but there's no real steeliness, or they won't frighten you. You tell Brian Fenton who would he rather mark, or who would he rather play in midfield, Matthew Rowan, Conor Loftus, or Tom Parsons, and I know he'll probably get more of a physical battle with Tom Parsons.
Maybe in one word, guys, just on the defensive matchups before we move on. So it's Chris Barrett. Is he going on Dean? Is he going on Connor?
I'd have him on Kilkenny.
Should do it, Stephen.
Let's go with Kilkenny. Yeah.
And then Keegan, if he does play in the full back line, is he going to have another crack at Con? Because he did get slipped for the goal, but does he want another crack? Is he that type of player? I think he is. Or would he go on someone like Paddy Small, or would he be moved out the field in as little words as possible?
I think Oshie Mullen will go on Paddy Small. I think that's the one there. I think if Oshie Mullen can go the opposite way and drag Paddy Small with him a few times, it mightn't be any harm. I think Paddy Small wouldn't have the experience. Probably he'd go with him once or twice. But Keegan probably wants to go on Conor Callahan. You're probably running out of matchups. You need to use him against Conor Callahan, but I think he could be more effective out the field.
Yeah, I think he'll mark Con because, like I said, I don't think Kieran Kilkenny has probably replaced Con inside the 21, but I think this Sunday, or this Saturday rather, you'll see a lot more changing between Con and Kilkenny, between both one or the other being on the 40 and the 21. It won't be as rigid as, Kieran Kilkenny's been inside the forward line. So I think, Keegan will sort of match whoever's on the 40 and Barrett on the 21. I think that just on Dean Rock, you think you just need someone to just man-mark him. If Dean Rock gets easy points for Dublin, I mean, the game would be over. I mean, every time I watch Dean Rock, he'll get the ball with 6 or 7 yards of space and he'll pop it over because, everyone's worried about Conor Callahan's pace and they're worried about Kilkenny's ability and they're worried about Paddy Small's pace.
Even us a little bit here. That at the moment we've no one marking Dean. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
I just think you just need someone with a little bit of experience or maybe a bit of cuteness. I know Keith Higgins has been on the bench. Whether Horan goes for a bit of experience here in key areas, maybe with Higgins, maybe with Parsons, but I think you just need someone to be clever on Dean.
But we all know what Dean's going to do. Dean's going to come around in the loop and just tap it over the bar. Everything he'll hold inside for as long as he can, wait for a bit of traffic, come around in the loop and tap it over the bar. So we've kind of gotten a lot there, and we're still gotten nowhere in a way. But let's go on to the Dublin back line. Sean, you've an interesting point on Aidan O'Shea and who's going to mark him. So Aidan O'Shea played the majority of the game, if not all the game, at 14. He's kind of sometimes roamed between 11 14 maybe in previous years, but it seems he's focused on 14. You've kind of theory on who Dublin are going to potentially either start or bring on late to I know where he's going with this. I know.
Yeah, there was a point. Aidan O'Shea scored a point against Tip, and it was
just before half time for those.
It was simple, and I was just kind of watching the game, and because the game was almost over, I was thinking, who's going to mark who, what will Dublin do? And it was a 20-yard pass. I don't even know how long a pass was. Aidan O'Shea used his body. He turned the full back and he fisted it over the bar. And I think it was one of the easiest points I've ever seen scored in Croke Park. And in my head, I just went, geez, he is, he's a different animal to what he was even a year ago or 2 years ago. That was the easiest point I've seen scored at Croke Park. It was the most effective point. And Desi Farr would have been sitting there with whatever he was, they always say with a glass of wine or something. He would have been sitting there going, he's a threat, and he's a proper threat this year. And he's not going to be, in and around midfield or the half forward line doing donkey work like that he's done before. I think he's going to be in on the 20-yard line, giving Dublin problems, and he's got shooters around him. So I think it might be a little bit of a risk to start Philly McMahon, because if Aidan O'Shea starts running out to half forward, then you've got Philly there, but Philly's well able for that as well. I think for Philly, he's probably got a little bit of unfinished business in the Dublin jersey. Didn't play as much as maybe he'd like last year. Came on with Tommy Walsh, if people remember. But I think Desi might trust that little bit of experience in Philly as well. Now, if they don't start Philly, Johnny Cooper will probably go on Aidan O'Shea. I think Johnny's a little bit rash at times. I think he's better with someone that's a little bit more flat or a little bit more what you'd expect. I think, like, for example, Johnny Cooper on Dean Rock, I think Johnny would have a great game. Whereas if you just got that little bit of X factor, Johnny might struggle. But I wouldn't be surprised that, like I said, Philly McMahon starting. I think he'll offer something different. And Philly will do his usual thing. He'll tire out Aidan O'Shea, and Aidan O'Shea won't get a point as easy as he did against Tipperary, Mark and Philly. And that's why I just think he's that big a threat this year at full forward. And everyone has spoken for years, where is Aidan O'Shea's best position? Everyone has said centre forward, full forward. But this year, I think he's starting to really nail down that 14.
And the thing is, he's linking up. He's just, before you win, he linked up well with Killian O'Connor a couple of times, and suddenly Mayo, and you're not, and that's not even mentioned Tommy Conroy yet. So suddenly Mayo have a forward line that I don't know if they've ever had this scoring threat in the forward line. And even Aidan O'Shea, while not always a scoring threat, will be laying off the balls to O'Connor and Conroy's team.
Yeah, and I have it written down here, Philip McMahon to start as well. I think Mayo will be delighted to see Johnny Cooper go in on Aidan O'Shea. I think they would be trying to get some sort of a rash tackle out of him and get him black carded or get him on a yellow straight away, and that would suit Aidan O'Shea down to the ground. I think if Desi's smart, well, Desi is smart, we know that. But I think if they get the clever move to do, I'm not sure if it's the clever move is get Philly in there, let him compete in the air with him. For his size, he's somebody who can compete really well physically, so I think Philly's a man. But yeah, that full forward line that they have now with Aidan O'Shea, Killian O'Connor, and Tommy Conroy, and they all treat them off with three different threats as well. So you've got the physicality of Aidan O'Shea, you've got the nippiness of Tommy Conroy, and you've got the shooting ability of Killian O'Connor and the scoring ability of Killian O'Connor. So you can't afford to take your eye off any of them. Probably Tommy Conroy is the one you can kind of, because of his inexperience, he's not totally proved at the top level yet. But yeah, I think that full forward line could really cause problems for Dublin. But again, if it's slow ball and it's slow football and it's a slow game, it's going to be a struggle to get ball into them.
And just on Killian O'Connor, then, if Fitzsimon's marked him in the past, will he pick him up again, Stephen?
Yeah, I reckon Fitzsimon's will go on to Killian O'Connor straight.
And then who, Merchant on Conroy or Byrne on Conroy, or?
Are we looking at Davy Byrne dropping out for Philly, or are we?
If Philly starts, it'll be Davy Byrne more than likely coming out. But
yeah,
I know you guys are both saying he'll start. I don't think he will start him. I do think he'll go and maybe put Johnny Cooper on him. On Aidan O'Shea, which may not, but you'll always have Philly Mac to come on if that doesn't work, where I think you know where to go if Philly Mac is struggling against Aidan O'Shea. But I guess you guys think he doesn't. Sean, you want to come in?
Yeah, the one thing with that is, I mean, if you do start Philly, then you're kind of relying on Johnny Cooper to mark Killian O'Connor, because I don't think you'd fancy Johnny Cooper against Conroy, maybe for his pace. I don't think Merchant will really man mark anyone as such. I think he'll just sit in front of that defence that he's really good at, and he's the key kind of possession carrier for Dublin out of that full back line and half back line. I mean, he's brilliant at that. So like there is a lot of, the only person who knows whether he's picking Philly Mac is Desi. And the team will be announced sometime tomorrow on Friday.
And then it'll be changed 4 times in between.
And you'll look at it.
That's the best part, isn't it?
But you'll look at the team and you'll go, geez, what's he thinking? And then it'll just make your mind even more confused. But I think if Philly starts, Cooper will mark O'Connor. and then I don't
it'd be
fancy.
Fitzsimons on O'Connor.
No.
You think then Fitzsimons will go on Conroy then?
Yeah, I think if Philly Mac
Okay.
starts, it'll be Fitzsimons on Conroy and Cooper on O'Connor. So that's no Davy Byrne, and Davy Byrne's been very good for Dublin this year. So, you know, like I said, that there's big decisions that if Philly does start, I just don't fancy Cooper against O'Shea. Maybe Cooper, you know, he has that experience, but I think O'Shea's just a different animal this year. Now, the thing about Aidan O'Shea is he's athletic and he's so quick as well. So if he wants, he'll get a ball out in front of Johnny Cooper, or he'll get a ball on top of Johnny Cooper. So I think that's just a different threat to what Mayo have had in the past, maybe in that full forward line. Like, they've always had good shooters. You think of Andy Moore and then O'Connor and the likes of Doherty and James Carr has played there in the past, but I think this full forward line is like, if you're to construct a full forward line, I think it's got everything you want. It's got that big full forward, it's got your free taker and your scorer, and it's got the excitement of Tommy Conroy inside. That's just a little bit of something different, maybe a little bit of X factor. And you don't know how he's going to respond to the pressures of an All-Ireland final, but if a semi-final is anything to go off, I mean, Dublin have real problems at the back there, and it's always been something I've always thought against Dublin is, if you were to take any line that's just a little bit weak, you'd say maybe the full back line. Now, the likes of Mick Fitz has been an all-star footballer for years, and he's, you know, probably been the one. He's probably been the one proper consistent figure rather at the back. If you think Johnny Cooper's had spells out with injury or whatever, Philly's had spells out, but he's been the one. And I think Mayo will fancy getting at that Dublin back line.
And just on before you come in, Stephen, I really think Cinnán O'Connor. Like, I don't know if it was just me had this narrative in my head that maybe he hasn't quite performed from play in Dublin, until I look back at all the Dublin-Mayo games and he's scoring these crucial equalisers, these crucial scores that keep Mayo in it, these crucial goals against Dublin off from play. So I don't know whether that's my narrative or just me forgetting it, but I straight away I was like, okay, so this is Cinnán O'Connor. And he's in the form of his life. He's broke the record for a championship record scored in the game of 4-9 in an All-Ireland semi-final, albeit against a Division 3 team. But I'm really expecting a massive performance from Cinnán O'Connor, and suddenly he's got Aidan O'Shea up there to lay the ball off. Like, this is a bit of a Kieran Donnelly Gooch kind of thing going on.
Yeah, like Cinnán O'Connor is somebody who's probably gone under the radar. Like, he's gone under the radar, but he hasn't gone under the radar. He's obviously a big figure in Gaelic games, but he's an overall record holder for championship points scored as well. Not just for that one game. So he's done it consistently. We just don't give him the credit that he deserves, and maybe it's because he's never won the All-Ireland. But this year he's flourishing, having Tommy Conroy and having Aidan O'Shea to take that attention away from him, because I think in the past he would have had double markers, or the sweepers would have been edging towards his side of the field, and he would have gotten a bit of extra attention, or the best man marker would have gone onto him. And I think he's flourishing now with sharing that burden with Aidan and Tommy Conroy. Now he's going to be key to Mayo performing well at the weekend, and that's a big thing for him, how he deals with that. Is he going to get 5, 6, 7 points? I really hope so. But if they can share out that amongst the three of them, I think that's Mayo's best chance of winning it. If they can get the three of them players involved in the game, get quick ball into them and let them do their work. If all hope probably fades on that quick ball in, or sorry, all hope is laid on that quick ball in and the three of them functioning inside. They are, as Sean said, is your all-star, what you want out of a full forward line. So let's see it work now.
Yeah, and I think it's probably like Dublin, you know, probably go quietly about playing a sweeper. They kind of, you know, not a negative sweeper, but someone that just protects rather than the traditional sweepers you might have got with Donegal. But I think the best way to play against that is to have three men inside, because the sweepers got more distance to cover. Like, I hate teams that when they know you're playing a sweeper driven side, that they have two men inside, or they might leave one inside. Put three inside, make the sweeper make his first run, and then you've got all of a sudden you've got space. And then what will happen is Dublin, or maybe if they won't, they'll put two back, and then you've got an extra body, and then you can oppose your running game a bit more. So that's what I think Mayo have. They've got three forwards with real threat. I mean, it's not as if any of them you wouldn't fancy marking, because you think Tommy Conroy is the least experienced, but a couple of those points against Tipperary, like I said, would have scared Desi Farrell. So I think if Mayo are to get joy, they're gonna have to get goals, and they're gonna have to, you know, break that duck that Dublin, you know, don't concede too many goals and they score a lot of them. So I think they've got to have to find a way of keeping them out, or putting the easy goal chances that Dublin seem to get. They always seem to have a spare man, and they need to get a goal preferably in the first half.
It's one of those games where you wish you would be there for Tyrone so you can see all the matchups. But hopefully Kevin's McStay is pretty good at pointing those kind of things out as on commentary. Moving on very quickly to the goalkeeping situations for kickouts. I want to focus on Dublin kickouts, but just before Mayo's kickouts, any case for Rob Henley starting ahead of David Clark for his second half performance on kickouts? No. Zero. You would have said that before the 2016 All-Ireland final and possibly the semi-final last year as well.
No, I don't think.
Because James Warren was asked and he did say he didn't rule it out. Now, I did think that was a time to maybe say, David Clark's our goalkeeper for the All-Ireland final. I did find it a bit strange. I don't think anyone else really picked up. He did say his quotes or something along the lines of, there's 2 weeks to the final. We'll see kind of what happens. But you think he'll stick with Clark? Yeah, definitely name Clark. Definitely name Clark in the team, whether he plays.
Clark made a couple of great saves.
Which could be as vital as times as his kickouts. Yeah,
and I think Rob Henley's very rash in his decision making. And like I say, the amount of times that you've always thought Dublin have a spare man over in attack, and the keeper might make a rash decision. So I think, look, you just hope David Clark has a good day with his kickouts, and Mayo have to be brave. If they're going to play short, they're going to play short. But other than that, I wouldn't be changing my goalkeeper again. They've done it before and it hasn't worked.
No. Yeah, I'd be the same. I'd be total disagreement with changing the goalkeeper. I think Clark. I think you're right, Dan. I think that was the opportunity for James Horan. All he was doing there was mind games. It was an opportunity to put some confidence into David Clark and say, "Look, you're my keeper here, number one." But I don't see the value in bringing Rob Henley in.
Yeah, and then last thing then on the Dublin kickouts, is there a case for Mayo giving Dublin every single one of their kickouts short, just purely based on that midfield battle? Or will they push up in a la Kerry maybe 2016 or maybe it was 13, sorry, when they pushed up maybe every 10 minutes, or maybe just after a score?
I think they're going to have to push up at some point. If you give Dublin that ball, they're going to hold that ball and they're going to do that slow possession. And it's going to, as we discussed at the start of the show, it's just going to cripple and wear out Mayo. I think they have to pick when to press, whether it's off slow ball when Cluxton doesn't have a ball in the net, or whether it's a free they can set up, or whatever it may be, or they've got people up the field. They pick their times to press and they pick their times to set up. I don't think they should nail their colours to the mast on any one. But if they decide to sit off to almost a 45 and let Cluxton hit the cornerbacks or the fullbacks, or if Dublin are just going to control and dominate that game, I think they have to pick their times to really go at Cluxton and really go at his kick. And if they go as long, that we do get numbers in around Fenton. But they have to pick their times. They can't go every time because Fenton will dominate, and they have to pick the correct time. So slow balls, like the freeze and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think you got to pick and choose your moments. I think that's why Mayo need a fast start, because, even if they're 1 or 2 points up or they're a point down or something, I mean, they can't be behind the 8 ball, because then, if they do, like Stephen said, just give, Mick Fitz the ball and let him amble out of defence to the 65-yard line unopposed. I mean, then Dublin are in total control. So that's why Mayo need a fast start. And I think that's why I'm not an advocate for water breaks, but I think they've helped this year. And I think the water breaks are going to help Mayo, because even it just to, you get your blood pressure up that high, and then you can just relax it by, listening to James Horan, getting that bit of instruction again. And it might just, you can clutch at straws all day trying to find ways to help Mayo. But I think it does. I think it helps teams. And you look at Waterford against Kilkenny in the semi-final, and you just thought, they absolutely destroyed them in that third quarter, and the water break helped them get back into that sort of rhythm again and into a defensive shape. Whereas, you keep playing that game at 100 miles an hour, and even if you're 8 points up and maybe you miss a few chances, and then the likes of TJ Reid just keeps popping over frees and they're still in the game. So I think the third quarter, is historically always been Dublin's strongest point. So I don't know how Mayo are going to manage that, but if they can get in to that third quarter and, they're still feeling good, then they have a chance. But like I said, the water breaks might help Mayo just slow the game down and calm the game down, because one thing that you'd always say about that Mayo team is they're erratic. No matter even if they're at their best, they're erratic. They take pot shots, they go for glory. How many balls end up in the keeper's hands? I mean, it's stuff you mentioned about Mayo. How many times in the heat of battle does a Dublin player, make a mistake like that? And you'd say very rare. Like you could rattle off a few examples, but how many times has a Mayo player done it? And I think that's just where they need to get better at, and if they have any chance.
Prediction then, Sean? By how many?
I'm gonna go Mayo first quarter, Dublin second, Dublin third, Dublin fourth.
And then extra time then, who's winning?
I think
Dublin then by how many points? Handicap 6.
6. I'll go.
You usually get it spot on.
I'll go 6. But I think, like I said, there'll be a point where in the 50th or the 60th minute where Dublin will just hold possession.
Stephen?
Yeah, Dublin by 7, because I've already got a bet with someone that's going to be plus.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it's one of them where Mayo could not just play well, but look like they could win with maybe 10 minutes to go, and you'd still go, well, if Dublin get a couple of goals here, it could be -6. I think it'd be closer. I think Dublin to win by less than 3 points. I do think Mayo put it up to them, and I do see Dublin not pulling away maybe, and they might just retain possession a bit more. But like you said, I'm similar. I think I'm clutching the same straws that Sean is. But lads, listen, really enjoyed that. We got really nowhere. We got loads with the matchups, but at times we got nowhere. Like if Philly Mac doesn't start, we're gonna have to record the podcast again, and that after Friday.
Or Tom Parsons.
But we got notes about half an hour before throwing. But thanks for listening. At Tackling Sport on social media. Premier League predictions will be out shortly as well, and we will come back for a review for the final. And Stephen, if you're welcome to join us there for a while on Monday, and we'll have a deep dive into the state of the Gaelic football, or we'll be celebrating Mayo. Well, celebrating the wrong word, but discussing Mayo's first All Ireland win since 1951. So listen, we'll enjoy it. We won't be a crowd there; it'll be different, but we're looking forward to it. So enjoy the game. Thanks for listening, and it's goodbye from Sean and Steve.
Up the Dubs.